One team has gone 4 games without a win. Another has won 4 in a row. BC's heading to Syracuse on Friday night. Mitchell Wolfe of Eagle Insider and myself are going to give our predictions on Friday's game.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome. This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. It's daily fantasy sports made easy. This is our prediction show. On Friday. BC is going to play Syracuse up in Syracuse. It's a 7:30 start on the ACC. On ESPN. One of the ESPNs. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but it's a big game. BC can get bowl eligible with the win. Syracuse could fall even further down their rabbit hole with Dino Babers falling even higher on the hot seat rankings. But to talk about BC and give our predictions today, I have Eagle Insider writer Mitchell Wolfe. Mitch, how's it going?
Going well. I was researching the previous iterations of this matchup over the last few years, and this has always been a weird game since Jeff Hafley took over. Prior to then, it was kind of a bit more cut and dry with kind of one team usually having a pretty solid handle on the other. But the last few years have been some very strange games between these two teams.
When you say strange, the one strange game I go back to over and over and again in my brain is the 2020 game where you had Phil Jakovic with, I think he had a separated shoulder at that point. Syracuse was playing, I think, their third string quarterback. And BC should have easily, we didn't know, again, go back to the injury stuff, right? I don't think we knew Jakovic had an injury in that game until after it. And we're wondering, he had been like playing really well. And all of a sudden, like, he's not throwing the ball at all. He's throwing horribly inaccurate. And this third string quarterback in Syracuse, when their season was a mess, like gets them back into that game. I keep going back to that as like a great example of how weird this series can be.
And I mean, in 2021, BC was leading 3-0 at the half and then was leading 6-0 about halfway into the third quarter. And then Syracuse reeled off 3 long touchdowns in the third quarter to put the game away. And then last year, obviously, BC is kind of coming to the end of a pretty bad season, but they get out to a 10-0 lead. Then they get up to a 17-6 lead early in the fourth. And then Syracuse just roars back to put up 26 points in the fourth quarter, and BC loses again. And there's the fight at the end of the game, which I kind of got reminded of it recently, but just another weird game in this rivalry.
So let's get into the next part of this rivalry. So you have two teams going in different directions. BC's won 4 in a row. Syracuse has lost 4 in a row. What does BC need to do what BC wins this game if they do what?
I think that this game plays well into what BC does well, in that Syracuse's defense has been really bad over the last few weeks. Their statistics for the season are kind of weird because, like most Syracuse seasons, they get off to a hot start. They beat up on some bad teams, and then they start ACC play, and usually they're a little more competitive. They'll pull an upset here and there, but this year they've just gotten absolutely waxed. And you think last week they're coming off a bye week, they're going to go play Virginia Tech, who's been not the best. So you think, oh, maybe they'll get it fixed, and then another just absolute blowout where they just are not competitive for the entire game, basically. So I think BC sets up well to run the ball. Virginia Tech now with Kyron Drones at quarterback plays a pretty similar offensive system to what BC does. A lot of the same concepts to running quarterback. So, if BC can emulate that on a short week, that should do well. On the other side of the ball, Syracuse's offense, again, it's kind of hit or miss. Again, last few weeks, they haven't really been competitive. Their offensive line, I think, is just getting worse every week. And they have some okay players, like LaQuint Allen is a solid running back. Damian Alford's a solid wide receiver, but losing Sean Tucker to the NFL and Aronde Gadsden to injury, that this team just doesn't have a dynamic playmaker. And Garrett Schrader's a good college quarterback, but at the end of the day, he can't do it all himself.
And some of the stats I think are really kind of telling of how much they've struggled. I put it up on Eagle Insider early today. They're averaging 8.5 points over their last 4 games. And Garrett Schrader is averaging 134 yards passing over the last 4 games. So their offense has really, really struggled. And, I think BC has, as you said, it's a perfect game. And I go back to what I look at, and I don't think they can do what they did. But what was it 2018 that they had AJ Dillon and David Bailey go berserk?
That was 19. 18 was the magical Eric Dungy Syracuse year.
Oh, right. When everyone thought.
But 19 was, where AJ Dillon and David Bailey just ran absolutely buck wild all over them.
And then we just go over the top to Zay Flowers a couple times every time they tried to load the box. I don't think they're going to get that kind of defense because that was awful. But I could see BC running the ball reasonably well against a defensive line that has struggled. Where do you think Syracuse's head is at right now? Do you think they're going to take a couple punches, or do you think they're going to wilt pretty quick?
So that's what kind of is interesting to me about this game is, obviously BC is riding this hot winning streak. Syracuse is getting demolished. And granted, I would say that, Virginia Tech is improving, but they've played some of the best teams in the ACC. I know North Carolina's lost 2 recently, and Clemson isn't Clemson, but those are traditionally the better teams in the ACC, and BC hasn't exactly played a murderer's row over the last few weeks. So I'm kind of worried that there's going to be some kind of regression to the mean for both teams, and that Syracuse will look a little better and BC will maybe look a little worse. But again, the problem with Syracuse is there just isn't any help coming. You don't have the explosive playmakers. Your offensive line isn't performing well. Defense is kind of just getting gashed. And I think BC's scheme really works well because the 3-3-5 that Syracuse is running, and it presents as more of a 5-1-5 because they move their outside linebackers down to basically be edge rushers. And that 5-1-5 defense is a lot of people have talked about how that is how the Patriots did so well against the Rams in the 2018 Super Bowl. And that defense is predicated on stopping zone runs and especially outside zone runs where teams want to use speed to get to the edge. And BC's not that. BC is a downhill run right at you with gap scheme. So, and that's exactly what Virginia Tech did so successfully last week. I think they ran for over 300 yards. So, I think if BC can put 2 drives together where they just, they're 7-8 minute drives, they just ram the ball down Syracuse's throat and they get scores out of that. I think Syracuse would probably again, I don't really see what they have to play for anymore because they're just not playing well. Then I just don't think they're going to get the job done. So I think if BC can get some of those long demoralizing drives, they can force Syracuse to quit pretty early.
And I also wonder, it's a dome, which, on a short week could be detrimental, on the road for a guy like Thomas Castellanos, but it also speeds up their play a little bit, I'm assuming too. So a faster guy like Castellanos is going to be a little bit faster if he's on turf. Just kind of the way I envision things might look too.
Yeah, I think relative to if they were playing somewhere with grass in late November, I would agree. Yeah. Granted, I think most of the games that he's played has been on turf this season. Maybe right. I don't know if Army has turf. They might not. And obviously that was a huge rain game, but that was his best rushing day of his career. So, maybe not career, but I just the other thing that I think is interesting is, Syracuse, again, they've had the first 4 games, they kind of blew some teams out. The Army game was competitive and they had to come back in that. But the last 4 games, they have not been able to mount a comeback. Whereas, and again, BC hasn't played the best teams, but they've had a lot of situations where the game has been very competitive late into the fourth quarter, and they have had to either protect leads or mount a comeback to, win the game in the second half. And regardless of kind of how Syracuse plays, if they are competitive throughout this game, I just don't know if they have the experience in those types of game situations, whereas BC does. So I think that could be a major advantage for BC late in this game.
And in a moment, Mitch and I are going to give our predictions for this game. You're going to want to hear what we pick and why we make the selections that we do. Now, PrizePicks is the most fun I've had, making up to 25 times my money this football season. And now I can play during basketball season too. You just select 2 or more players and based on their projection stats and place your entry. With basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the specials league. For right now, you could look on NFL and you could get a quarterback like Kenny Pickett with 218.5 pass yards over under. Mitch, you're a Steelers fan. What would you take on that?
I would probably take the under. He's
Right.
coming off a rib injury, and I don't think the Titans defense is a lot to write home about, but with how the Steelers offense has been performing this season and with Pickett being injured on a short week, I would definitely not take the over there.
All right. And then you could combine that with the NBA. So you could get like LeBron James against the Clippers at 22 points. You can add a couple extra players and boom, you get it all going. So go on to PrizePicks. It's simple and easy to play. You can turn $10 and $250 so easy. I make my picks, submit my entries in less than 60 seconds. And with quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Locked on BC, I'm your host, AJ Black, and we're talking about the Syracuse game. This is our big prediction show. This is for Thursday. Because it's a Friday game, we're going a little early here. Our Friday show is actually going to be a post-game wrap-up show. I don't know if Mitch will be around. I will, and I'll be recording that. So you won't be seeing a Friday morning show in your feed. You'll see one Friday night after the game is over. Now, this game is basically almost even when you look at a lot of the books. When you look at FanDuel and you look at some of the books out there, it's pretty much an even split. Mitch, what is your prediction for this game? I'll let you go first.
I'm going to pick BC to win. I'm going to pick them a lot closer this week. I'm not going to be as bullish as I was last week. My prediction is going to be 31-24. And like I said, I think that the number of ways for Syracuse to win is just significantly less than the number that BC has. Because I think BC can kind of win in a more dominant fashion in that, they could just take the life out of the game by running the ball, and they win in maybe a pretty low scoring game. But the other way is that maybe Syracuse does have a good game and they come out on offense, and BC is kind of matching them. But then I think in the later parts of the game, BC has more of that clutch gene, if you will. They're able to get the win late. The only really realistic path I see for Syracuse is that BC has to come out and make a ton of mistakes and mistakes that Syracuse capitalizes on, because we saw BC make mistakes against UConn, but UConn wasn't really able to capitalize on a lot of them. And say what you will about UConn, say what you will about Syracuse, but they're definitely more talented than UConn is. So, I think as long as BC doesn't make a ton of critical mistakes early that Syracuse is able to score points off of, I think that they've got a pretty good chance of winning this game. The whole narrative about 4-team win streak versus 4-game win streak versus 4-game losing streak is making me a little nervous, because it's everything on paper is lining up for BC. But at the end of the day, I just think that they're going to be more prepared, and I think schematically they match up pretty well against this kind of team.
All right. And I'm going to agree with Mitch, and I'm going to pick BC to win as well. Big surprise, right? And I'm going to pick a score of 31-17. I'm going to pick a little bit bigger spread for this one. And here's why. I think one thing that I've learned about Thomas Castellanos over his first couple starts is this is a guy that develops. This is a guy that learns and is continuing to pick up the game as he goes along. He had I don't know how to say a big setback, but a pretty reasonable setback against UConn, where he came down to earth. He looked like Superman for a couple weeks there. And then all of a sudden now he had some pretty significant issues that caused some BC to not run away with that game. I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder in this one. I don't see him making the mistakes that cost them points again. And as long as he's healthy, and everything I've read, it sounds like it was an illness thing more than an injury thing. If that's what the case was, I think he'll be able to get back and do some things on the ground again. He didn't do really all that much against UConn. I like to see him do that. I think this is a perfect game for BC's defense. As you said, Mitch, they don't have a lot of big weapons. There's not a guy on that offense that I go, oh crap, this defense is going to struggle against. I think Garrett Schrader will score some points, but he's only one guy. Last year he had Sean Tucker and some other, as you mentioned, some other guys that really exploited BC. He doesn't have that this year.
And honestly, like we talked about earlier in the show, the last 2 games that BC has played against Syracuse, Sean Tucker has really taken over those games late. They were kind of in 2021, the Syracuse offense was kind of plodding along, and then Tucker finally broke through with a big 50-yard run. And then last year, Schrader hits on some big passes, but Tucker had a much better game consistently and then had 2 touchdowns to really put the game away late. So, again, LaQuint Allen's a solid running back, but he's not Sean Tucker. I mean, Tucker's a program legend at one of the best running back college programs in college football. So they just don't have those guys. And again, the offensive line isn't Virginia bad, but I honestly think they're worse than UConn. So I think that should really help BC's defensive line, who is very close to making a lot of splash plays. They are just hairs of a second away from making a lot of sacks and tackles for loss against a worse offensive line and a quarterback that is struggling to manage the pocket. His internal clock is not set right, so he's taking a lot of sacks. So I think this could be a really good game for BC's defensive line.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick 31-17. My biggest concern with this game is the dome, and I saw I think one of the Syracuse sites put up that they've sold out, it's the highest. It's going to be the highest attended game of the season.
Oh wow!
So that'll be interesting to watch. But no, there's no other player I would want more than Thomas Castellanos to quiet a crowd. So I could see that happening. So I'm going to pick BC to win this game and to win it by the spread. Now, in a moment, Mitch and I are going to go give our picks of the week. Will I continue to struggle with my picks, or will I actually get things right this time? So let's head over to FanDuel. FanDuel is the number one. You can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better place or time to get in the action. I'm going to throw a picture up on the screen if you're on YouTube right now. On FanDuel, the spread for the BC game is 1.5 points in favor of Syracuse with an over-under of 50.5. I am picking the under in this game. Mitch you picked the under. Oh, no, you picked the over on this one.
I'm
right?
Slightly over, but I would probably lean the under here, honestly.
And we're both picking BC to cover. Now, are you thinking of the same thing? If you're outside the state of Massachusetts, and I think the state of New York too, you can make a wager on this game. Otherwise, there's there's NBA action. You can get the Celtics game. You can get Bruins. There's everything on FanDuel. It's perfect. So head on over to FanDuel right now. And when you use promo code Locked On, you're going to get in to get that $150 deal if your team wins. So get spreads, player props, over unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, the official sports partner of the NFL. This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black, wrapping things up here with Mitch Wolfe. This is our prediction show. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. If you enjoy our work, head over to Eagle Insider. 99 cents for the first month if you want to try a monthly subscription just to test it out. I'm telling you, Mitch's film reviews are worth way more than 99 cents a month. Check it out. Sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulty here. Mitch, can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, cool. I just had the little thingy go on. Mitch, let's get your first pick of the week.
Well, I went 0-4 last week, so you actually gained some ground on me. Woo! So good for you. Your current record stands at yours is 9-21-2, and I'm 14-18. So I'm going to start off with an over, and I'm going to go with Washington USC over 75.5. And this is mostly just a fun pick. I want to see as many points scored as possible. You got 2 high-flying offenses, 2 really good quarterbacks, and 2 defenses that aren't really that good. And I think Washington's favored by, I want to say like 5 or 5.5, something like that. So I think you're going to see another shootout here. A lot of points, but I think both teams will probably get into the 40. I mean, they both need to get into the 40s, honestly, to ensure this hits. So Washington USC over 75.5.
All right. I'm going to start in the SEC, and I'm going to go with my buddy Lane Kiffin, who's facing off with Texas A&M. They're only a 3-point favorite at home. Ole Miss is 7-1. I don't know. I feel like this is a perfect game for Texas A&M to wilt, and especially on the road. They're playing in the Grove. I'm going to go with Ole Miss here. I just get a feeling, a team that is, they're averaging almost 500 yards a game. They're throwing well. They're doing everything. They've only lost once. They basically just need to win this game to cover. I'm going to go with Ole Miss.
And you said that's Ole Miss -3.
Yep.
Okay, got it. All right. My next one is going to be Oklahoma State +5.5. This is the last bedlam we're going to see for a while as Oklahoma's leaving the Big 12 this year. It is in Stillwater. Unfortunately, the game's only at 3:30, or I think it's 2:30 p.m. local time. So you're not going to get the pitch black night games you see at Stillwater. But Oklahoma State has really turned things around behind running back Ollie Gordon. Oklahoma's coming off a tough loss at Kansas. Their defense is not playing great. Their star linebacker, Danny Stutzman, is hurt. He's going to give it a go, I think, but if he's limited, that could really help Oklahoma State's rushing offense. And obviously, Oklahoma State's going to be really motivated to take out Oklahoma and pretty much knock them out of the college football playoff race with this by beating them here. So Oklahoma State +5.5.
All right. Next, I'm going to go to the Big Ten. And I was debating on which one I wanted to go with, but I'm going to go with Penn State at 8.5 over Maryland. Maryland is in the midst of a nice free fall. They just lost to Northwestern last week, 33-27. You let up 33 points to Northwestern. They lost by 30 points last year to Penn State. Penn State is like right on the verge of a playoff push here. They need to beat teams and beat them badly. I think Maryland's a perfect team for them to beat up on, and I think they're going to cover 8.5.
Yeah, Maryland's got a lot of weird stuff going on. Like, I think they're having some injuries. I think Kevin Sumlin their offense coordinator was recently arrested for a DUI. So a lot going on there. I am the only thing that would concern me is Penn State looking ahead to playing Michigan next week. That would be my only concern there for this game. AJ, you might have been noticed that something is not, as I've not mentioned something on my board of picks yet. So you may be thinking that I'm not taking the Iowa Northwestern.
I was going to ask you if you're going to go for that one.
So it opened at a historic low of 29.5. It's now up to 31.5.
Is that because Brian Ferentz got fired, or
probably? Which means I'm taking the under, because honestly, 29.5. I don't know if I could do it. I think I would have just to keep the bit going, but at 31.5, I'm definitely taking it. This game is being played in Wrigley. The only thing I am concerned now is Brian Ferentz just going to empty the playbook out now that he's already basically been fired and say, well, now it doesn't really matter anymore. And they put up like 31 by themselves or something crazy like that. But in all honesty, that's probably not going to happen. They'll probably score like 17 and Northwestern will score like 13. So I'll still take the Iowa Northwestern under 31. And this game is being played in Wrigley, so that should be an interesting element. So Iowa Northwestern under 31.5.
Wrigley Field was fortunate enough to get that train wreck of a game.
I mean, I think it's a lot of like, oh, like we'll have Northwestern then some other Big Ten team because a lot of alumni are in Chicago or whatever.
All right, and my final pick of the week, I'm gonna take. I was texting you about this. I'm gonna take Notre Dame at -3 at Clemson. I don't know how riled up Dabo is after what was his name from
Tyler.
From
Spartanburg.
From Spartanburg, yep. But Notre Dame's defense is really, really good. And Clemson's offense has been awful. And again, just like I picked with Penn State, like Notre Dame is jockeying for position here. Nothing's going to look better than smacking the crap out of Clemson. So I don't, if their defense wasn't as good as it was, I would say Clemson might have some motivation to get or ability to get past this. I can't see that offense scoring on Notre Dame.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I feel like I don't think Sam Hartman has ever beaten Clemson. So I think this year, obviously Notre Dame's offense is, not the best right now, especially in the passing game. But given that defense, you'd think Sam Hartman's really going to be gunning to finally get that win over Clemson after spending so much time at Wake Forest.
Any other thoughts on any other picks that you're not making official?
Oh man, I would have to look at the board again, but I would probably. I mean, I think we're really entering like the pinnacle season of Big Ten unders. I think you got like Nebraska, Michigan State this week, and who's Wisconsin playing?
I thought Illinois and Minnesota was that.
Illinois, Minnesota. That'd be a great under. So I mean, once you get into November, really just if you pick and especially in the Big Ten West, just pretty much pick any under and
42.5 for Illinois and Minnesota.
Oh man, I would hammer the under on that.
Oh, all right, take my Penn State one out. Put the under on that. All right, that's my pick. Illinois and Minnesota, 42.5. I'm going under on that.
All right, there we go. Now getting you on the over under train instead of just picking Reds.
You talked me into it, Mitch.
There we go. All right, great. I'm sure that won't come back to bite me in the pick in the rankings.
All right, so Mitch, where can people find you?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. My matchup report for VIP members on Eagle Insider was just posted today. We'll have my weekly preview for the Syracuse game posted by the time you're hearing this, most likely. So that'll be up on Thursday before the game, so you'll have plenty of time to read it before Friday's game. So again, just make sure you check out stuff on Eagle Insider.
Yeah, and just echoing that again, become a subscriber. We have tons. We're going to get into transfer portal news, and I talk to the staff. I talk to transfers. I talk to everybody. If you want to get that news, if you want to get the inside, of X's and O's, we have Mitch. If you want hockey news, we got BC Hockey Blogger giving you detailed hockey news. We've got everything on our site, and it's 99 cents to check it out. You can get a yearly subscription too if you want to. But I'm telling you, sign up now. You're going to get the best BC coverage out there that gives you details of what's going on, not just what the coaching staff says, because if you just listen to what the coaching staff says, you're not going to get very far with what's going on. We've got analysis. We've got it all. Check it out on Eagle Insider. Now follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. You can also follow Mitch as we said, or follow us on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button to follow Locked On Boston College. We're going to be back again tomorrow night on Friday after the game to give you full post-game analysis of the BC Syracuse game. Hopefully you'll have a win. We'll talk all about it on Locked On BC, your team every day.